share it. What's up? IG Live, first collab convo. Hype. It's gonna be fun. I'm looking at Bianca. She's here. Now they heard you. There she is. Yay. Let's bring her in. People are joining in. Yes. Good. What's up, Isis?
Can you
How's
see
it going?
me?
Oh, look at your setup. Nice.
This is the other side of my office. You're usually looking at a blank green wall. But I decided to look like I'm actually in an office today.
I'm using a new iPhone. I haven't got used to it yet.
I'm wondering if I'm going to try and put on my Do Not Disturb.
Let me share this with the world.
See me and hear me, Kyle?
Yes, I can.
Sweet. It's my first IG Live.
This is your first IG Live ever?
Yes. What? I used to do Periscopes back in the day, and I loved them, but I haven't been on video in a long time.
Well, I'm excited about that. That's pretty cool.
No pressure.
I didn't know this was your first IG Live. No pressure.
It is.
I'm gonna give people a little bit of time to come in before we get started.
Okay.
But yeah, that's good. I did not know this was your first.
It is. I tell you, I'm nervous.
Well, this is Collab's first Instagram Live. It's not my first personal one, but it is Collab's first IG Live. So and this is the start of a new series that we're going to be doing, Collab Convos. We're going to try to do at least one a month, where we talk to people who have unique perspectives, have a lot to say, and are doing really good stuff in the community. The first one we are doing with our own Isis Williams, but she does so much. I can't wait to dive into it.
All the things.
Yeah. So I guess we can get started a little bit with your background. I can't stop looking at Bianca. Bianca's over here.
Hi, Bianca. Thanks for running the live.
So let's talk a little bit about why we're doing this now. This week, it's this week, right? You're going to be receiving.
It's next Thursday, the 24th.
Next Thursday, yes.
Yeah.
This week coming up, the 24th, you'll be receiving the Medal of Freedom from the county.
Yes.
So let me back up a little bit before we even start talking about that. When I met Isis in 2020,
crazy.
And when we were formulating the idea of what Collab could be, we had this online group discussion about how can we create actual tangible change in communities. And from that time when we met, she has done so much. I'm just going to give you an individual perspective, not even her whole life story, just from me. So since then, since I met her in 2020, and we formulated the actual Collab organization, she has broken barriers as being the first Black woman elected to, I believe it was the city council, the board of education.
The first Black person.
First Black person, not even a woman, first Black person.
Position of in any political position in the township. So it happens to be for the Board of Education, but just in general.
So that was the first thing she did. She was the first Black person to be in any political position, which that just seems, it seems like in 2020.
Insane.
Yeah, it seems insane. But you were the one to do it. That I was like, wow, that's crazy. Then her organization, which she is the president of, the HTEI, Haddon Township Equity Initiative, they put on the first Pride Parade in Haddon Township, which I was there. They asked me to film. It went beyond my expectations. I don't know if it was beyond yours, but it was such a huge event. There was so many people. There was so much joy. And it was something that, I don't even think the township knew that they needed to have, that you brought to them, and was such a successful event.
Yes.
And now you're getting the Medal of Freedom. This is all in a 2-year span, people. 2 years she's done all this. So she's just an amazing person.
Thank you.
I'm always honored to every time she's on a call or, giving us pointers. Like your knowledge base is never ending. Like, so much about how to put on events, how to contact people, how to make sure that we are protecting ourselves as an organization. So I'm just, so glad that you're a part of COLLAB and so glad to know you.
Oh, thank you, Kyle. Ditto.
But I want to talk about really what made you do those things. Why do you think those actions are necessary? And what do you think is necessary for the future? Where do you see us, in a political landscape coming up? Like so we're going to get into all that during this conversation.
Okay.
So we'll start with what started your journey as an activist?
So it's so funny to hear you refer to me as an activist, because I'm still having a little bit of a challenge accepting that title for myself, but it is what it is.
You are an activist.
Apparently.
Yes.
Like most things in my life, in all honesty, I kind of fell into the position. I found myself, like most others after the murder of George Floyd, just in a position of feeling helpless and very afraid. Afraid for myself and mostly afraid for my son. As a new parent, that parent drive, man, that'll get you going.
That will do it.
Yeah, I also found myself at the opposite end of a crazy Facebook community post that was really talking about Blacks, and it was just full of racial divide, and it was sad, and I felt myself in this helpless state, feeling the need to say something. So I started commenting and kind of just feeling like the need to defend myself. Shortly thereafter, I paired up with a group of wonderful women, moms. There were 9 of us who just wanted to see change in our community. And like I said, the power of the parent, man, that thing will drive you to anything. So we started a group, just a community volunteer organization, and we decided to focus primarily on education and community outreach. We felt like those were the areas where we could make the most impact. Well, what I've since learned is that though most people want to get involved, it's really hard to be the first one to take the first step. That's why I'm so motivated by COLLAB, because someone has to take the first step. The people will meet you there once you get there. So HTEI started, and we just started honestly with a YouTube collaboration called I Wish You Knew, and we talked about racism and just from the standpoint of being able to inform others, expose others to difficult conversations. So that's where we started, and since then we have done a number of education-based training and focused and community-based initiatives that have proven successful. Pride exceeded all of our expectations by far. I joke and say that initially I think that when we met with the mayor to ask for Pride, he probably thought it was going to be like the 9 crazy moms and their families walking down Haddon Avenue for 15 minutes. So we
that was
couldn't
not
have
what it was.
at all. We couldn't have imagined it would be as large as it was, but it just goes to show you, if you create the opportunity, people will show up, and there's a responsibility that comes with that, right? So in my eyes, I felt like Pride was a driving force for me, because I remember walking down for the March for George Floyd and feeling like in a community where there weren't many people that looked like me, no one was going to show up. But I was going to walk anyway. I told Chris,
Right.
I don't care if it's just the 2 of us, we're walking down this avenue. I don't know where it ends or anything. So as people started showing up, and eventually I was surrounded by 400 people, none of which looked like me, I was just so overwhelmed. So I wanted to give that same opportunity, me personally, as it relates to Pride. Right. I didn't know we'd be walking with 6,500 other people, but
Right.
It was great. And then there's a level of accountability to that group, like the same way that you saw people that may not live your same lifestyle, may not be able to relate, that want to support in some semblance of allyship show up for you. you have a responsibility to show up for the next group and the next
Right.
group and the next group. And there's power in numbers and there's accountability the same. And we can have like real actionable change. So I just fell
Yeah.
into it. I've stayed in it. I'm motivated by it. And I'm just crazy enough to believe that we can make change. I really do.
Yeah, I don't think you fell into it. You stepped up to it. Is how I look at it. Like you saw the need for something. I think a lot of people see the need, but everybody doesn't take that step. And as you said, like sometimes somebody has to take the first step for others to figure out how to do it, and that's really what you were doing. I was very curious as to what the conversations were like initially um, around race, because that's very difficult for people who aren't Black, because Black people have those
Yes.
conversations all the time.
Yes.
It's not something that we shy away from because we can't. It's necessary for our
Correct.
survival in this country. But being in a diverse group like HTEI, when you guys were formulating, like, what were those conversations like? And how did you guys come to the conclusion that this is the kind of move you wanted to make as an organization?
I think that we were all equally passionate about change. And one thing about change is you have to be willing to admit what you don't know. And we constantly encourage learning and relearning and unlearning. And it's true. I'm also the only Black person who's on the board of HTEI. So initially when we started and we weren't a board and it was just 8 of my neighbors that I didn't know at all. I met them in one of their backyards. It was a little challenging and it was tough, but we all committed to the process and to learning and to grace. We give grace. We emphasize grace with self and grace with others because it is a very hard and challenging discussion. I can only speak as a Black mother. I can't speak for the entire Black race. I can speak to my experience and I can speak to what works and doesn't work for me. And sometimes that's really challenging because you find yourself sidestepping and code switching, and I don't want to do that in real life. So I've just had to learn to be very uncomfortable at times, aka being on an IG live, in order to like push past my own comfort to have some kind of meaningful effect, So discussions of race are not easy. People are often offended. People come to the conversation with their own level of bias. There's a lot of self-reflection that's needed. There's a lot of, there's a lot of guilt. But we have to have hard conversations. I feel like for me personally, beyond myself, I'm fighting for the security of my son, who is a Black boy, soon to be a Black man in a country that does not accept him, that sees him as a threat, regardless of how cute or funny or fine he is. And I spend every day preparing him for that battle. But we're going to get to a point where I can't prepare him, nor can I protect him. And I need to have the conversation as often as I can, feeling that maybe there'll be some influence that can help him.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons that, like you mentioned, code switching. I've always been against that because none of that can protect us. Like, I remember coming to that realization, like, it doesn't matter if you're wearing a suit or if you're talking with the 100% correct dialect. At the end of the day, the systems that are in place will still see you lesser than and treat you lesser than, and you still are treated as a threat in a lot of ways. So that's why I think it's very important that we do systemic change, which you have done by, actually running for office and getting involved in the system. So I want to know, like, what has that experience been like for you? Of being the first Black person. Like, how has that been so far?
It's been great. It's been challenging. I remember my hesitation with submitting the application, if I was being completely honest, because the reality is no one wants to be the first or the only. I don't want to navigate a district, as the first Black anything, because there's a lot of weight that comes with that. Also understanding that if I don't take the opportunity, who knows when the next one's going to come by. it had been over 100 years before I was able to get in a position. So I feel like we have an obligation when we have an opportunity to fulfill that opportunity. I'm challenged, but I speak my mind. I found my voice in this work. I feel very uncomfortable at times, but I still speak, you know, and I feel there's value to doing so. Because if you miss the opportunity, like, you're not going to have any chance of change.
Right.
So it's hard, Kyle. I'm not going to lie. And at times
I can
I'm also,
imagine.
yeah, it's really challenging. But then I have times like at graduation, you know, I when I put on the robe, that was very emotional for me, walking out on the field, and I wasn't quite prepared for that. I realized when I was walking and looking in the crowd and seeing other Black families that it was the first time that other Black families could look on the field and see someone that looked like them. So that relieves the weight, you know. It's just knowing, like, I remember my graduation. I remember Sister Soldier spoke. So, you know, I don't know if there is a young Black girl that looks out and sees me and feels inspired. I certainly hope so, but that's part of my obligation.
There definitely is. They're definitely out there. And even if it's not a direct thought like, oh, that's what I want to be, it's a thought that that's possible. Like, now
Correct.
that's a possibility to them. And for, you know, people don't really realize how much representation like that matters.
Yes.
And it is very difficult to be not only the first, but the only Black person in the room, because you feel such a responsibility for utilizing your voice in the right way. Right.
Yes.
Like, you know, they come to you for everything about that. But I think, you know, you're a great voice to have in any room. And I know that you aren't going to be afraid to, you know, let them know what you really think and let them know what they need to hear as a community, and make sure that the people that you are there to represent, you will be representing, which is so important. It is really crazy to me that you're the first one in the, like, that doesn't even make sense.
It's funny because when I have conversations, like, I'm really passionate about special education, and when I have conversations, I'm very honest. I'm like, look, I'm speaking from this role now, but let's not get it twisted. I was the angry Black mother for a long time, and I know that's what you were calling me then, because I was, quite frankly, you know, fighting for my child, and fighting for my Black child, and fighting biases I wasn't prepared to fight. And, you know, you get assigned all these titles, and with those titles, there's this sense of responsibility. But at the same time, first and foremost, I'm a Black woman and I'm a mother. So the rest of the titles, to me, you know, they're wonderful additions, but they're not the ones that drive anything I do.
Right. Yeah, I think, you know, having that, remembering that foundation, because I feel like you're going to keep going to different places and different rooms. Remembering that foundation is always really key, in making sure that you are staying true to the people that you want to represent. And that's not just for you, that's for every representative. I feel like if you get into something, you want to make sure you're doing it for the people that it matters to. So speaking about that, how do you feel about what's going on in the country now? You know, like, we all got together in 2020. There was a huge racial reckoning that was happening in this country. There was a whole lot of discussions. As I feel like there has been a shift in tone in the amount of discussions. I think, and there's a lot of reasons for that, but it's very difficult to keep up that same momentum that was happening at that time period. But how do you feel about what's going on, you know, now?
I'd like to say that I'm surprised, but I'm not, you know. I'm disappointed, but I'm not surprised. It's easy to get involved when things are the hot topic, the hot button, and you have a lot of guilt associated with it. It's really difficult for people at times to move beyond what serves them. So that's why it's important when you show up, you have to be committed to the fight. Like, it's not going to affect you, but it affects me. So I have to stay in it, you know, and politics are just that. People are going to sway to the way of the vote. So right now, race and equity and all those initiatives that were buzzwords when people were working from home with nothing to do, people have since moved on from, except the people that it actually affects. Hold on one second. My son is here. Sorry. This is real life.
Yeah, so I 100% agree with that same idea. I'm not surprised. I'm not, I guess I'm disappointed, but I'm like, I kind of figured this is what was going to happen. I kind of felt like that's where it would be. But what bothers me though is the things that we were fighting for at that time period have not changed at all. Like
Correct.
very recently, there's been another Black person killed from a no-knock warrant. That like those still exist. We still haven't gotten any real like actual national federal legislation on the books that's going to protect us from what we were fighting for. Like so it was like you said, it was a lot of buzzwords, there was a lot of talk, there was a lot of initiatives, and
it felt good.
as much as I love good. Right, yeah, it makes you feel good. As much as I love, seeing all the solidarity from organizations putting up billboards, like change how you operate.
Yeah.
Because that's really what we're asking for.
I mean, it's easy to put up a black square on Instagram and relieve some of your personal guilt, but when it comes to like standing beside people, using your influence to make change, people don't want to do that. They don't want to rock the boat and rock their relationships. And quite frankly, for a lot of people, doing so can, put their own situations at risk, right? We have to be willing to risk our situation to protect ourselves. So I'm not surprised.
The other thing
I'm just disappointed.
I think a lot of people tied that movement to Trump.
Yes.
Unfortunately. And they feel like since Trump's no longer in office, everything's better. And
everything's
that is
good.
Not true. This is 1,000% untrue. And I guess, we have a new administration, and one that we would like to believe is more amenable to hearing the causes of minorities, and hearing, people of color and people who are, not as well represented. But so far, those changes have not been put into place.
Correct.
There have been things that have been written, but they haven't been passed.
Correct.
And the midterm elections are coming up, so now we are back in a position where, it can go either way, which is to me can be very alarming, because after the last election, after Black people, and specifically Black women, who did a whole lot of organizing, a whole lot of legwork, have won the election essentially for the Democratic Party, there's been a huge pushback from Republicans nationwide in terms of rewriting the district laws with gerrymandering, trying to restrict Black votes in every way they can, every way possible. And if we were to lose the midterm elections and have not have a Democratic House or Senate, that could be very dangerous.
Yes.
So
the problem is, Kyle, in my opinion, right? We don't position ourselves beyond being able to vote, right? We see the power of organizing and voting, but we don't position ourselves for the long-term change. Not only do we have to vote, we have to occupy the seats, right? Because I don't even know if people know enough about the midterm elections, if they do their research, if they know to show up how to get involved, when to get involved, how to organize, how to hold people accountable. But if we're just operating from the role of citizen, right, we're kind of restricted. We have to actually place ourselves in these positions in order to have long-term change as well. And again, it's interesting because it's all market, right? It's market and it's market share. They market to you what they think you want to hear, and then they take your portion of the market share for their benefit, right? And then we no longer use that same market share for the purpose of accountability. Exactly. We just walk away. That's why COLLAB in particular really talked to my heartstrings, because that's how you get to long-term change, long-term effect. People are held accountable to whatever the legislation says, right? So the introduction isn't enough. It needs to be passed in order for you to have something to hold people accountable for. But we walk away.
I feel like that's why so many Black people and Black voters get frustrated, because they do all this work to vote. They do all this work to register people and make sure that they come out. And then that work is not rewarded in a way that feels meaningful to our community. So by the time the next election comes around, we're like, didn't matter. Like that happens, seems to happen generation after generation. And it does matter. One, like that's not a true, like it feels that way, but it's not true. But like you said, there's more steps that have to be applied. It's like, you know, if someone wants to go to the gym and get in shape, you can't, you know, try to work out one day and, oh, we voted. Now I feel like that's not how it is. No, it's a long process. There's a lot of steps you have to take to do that. You know, you have to change a lot of different things. And I feel like we get stuck on the vote, on like this is day one. And then we wait 4 years and then we do another vote. But like most other, you know, and it's not just groups of people, like, you know, not just minorities or different cultures. Most organizations like the NRA or school teachers, or they have lobbies. And that was my idea with COLLAB, is like, we need something that is going to speak for Black people longer, on a longer term, that's consistently there, that makes sure our interests are being heard and are being felt. Because if you don't have something that is putting pressure constantly on representatives, like why would they do it? You know, that's always my question, is like, you know, you vote for somebody, after they have your vote, now what? Like, how do they continue? So we have to, you know, we're still figuring all of that out. But I do feel like I feel like that energy is coming closer and closer to where, you know, our culture is figuring that out, that we have to do more. We have to be involved more and in different ways.
Yeah, and I think that part of the discussion has to be that it's long-term change. Like, I think people go into their votes and their commitments with a short-term view. I've waited all this time. I don't see the change. I'm going to jump in now and it's going to happen. And that's not realistic. I mean, we had a discussion in one of the equity groups about dismantling structural racism and what that means. And at the end of the day, like, you're fighting a foundation that is literally doing what it's supposed to do. You showing up every 4 years to cast a vote is not going to change the foundation. It really requires everybody realizing whatever their share is of that pot and pulling it. So the whole thing like dismantles and then rebuilding. Most people don't stick around long enough to do that. Also, we suffer a lot of times with a lot of populations from like groupthink, right? Like somebody says something, and then all of a sudden that's your belief system, and now you're fighting for something you don't even understand. And in the Black community, the harm is we're harming ourselves, right? Like the media will put it out there. We can pick it up and run with it to our own detriment, which is really sad.
Yeah, that happens a lot with us. And I think you said something that was it is super long term, and a lot of times we get caught up on short term battles. And that can be so taxing, right? Like, and it's not that it's not important, but it's not the structural change we need. Like, for example, every day there are cases of injustice that happen to Black people, and then you can get caught up looking at the news cycle about every individual case and trying to bring every individual, you know, police system, like police jurisdiction to, you can try to, you know, do that every day, everywhere, every city in this country. But that's still not going to create the change, because once they fire those officers, they're going to bring in more officers that are doing the same thing. You know, you look at the judges that they find that are corrupt or have connections to, you know, white power associations. You can try to remove that judge, but that doesn't change the system that allowed that judge to be in place. So it's a much, you know, I've always taken a much broader view, as like, how do you change the entire system that is creating that's allowing this to happen? And that's a much bigger fight. And it's a much harder fight. It's longer, and it doesn't have the immediate satisfaction of, you know, seeing someone go to jail. But what it does do is prevents the, you know, my whole thing is, I don't want the next generation. I don't want your son and my son and my nephew to have the same fight. The fight should be easier for them. You know, they shouldn't be worried about the same things. But that requires foundational changes. And it's hard to even see that, because the news will, it's it's in everything. Like you're talking
Yeah, and
about.
it's taxing. The work
Right.
is taxing, the pain is taxing, the restart is taxing. You really have to surround yourself with people that see the same end goal. And
Right.
it's not immediate. It's like I would want to move into a house that was built in a week. Like I'm gonna need
Right.
some security in the structure. I'm gonna need
Right.
some things passed to make sure it's gonna be, long standing. But we want immediate effect. Like when I took the position, I committed myself, and like most things, right? Let's be realistic. It's a sacrifice. I mean,
Yes.
collab is a sacrifice. People think, oh, let's start this nonprofit, and then you start it, and you're like, well, dang, I need to stay out of jail. Like, let me make sure I do this. We can't grow too quick. You know me, I'm always like, wait, hold.
Yeah. Right.
Because part of it is having a structure that is long-standing. When you start to pick up momentum, the easiest way to kill your dream is to like chop at whatever your shortfalls are, right? So you have to build the structure to do the work, and then you have to do the work that is taxing and and challenging, and then you have to be realistic. You might not see the effect of what you're doing until Kal-El is 10 years old, 15 years old. Like, are you committed to 15 years of disappointment before you reap the reward? I saw something that said, I saw it like yesterday or the day before. It was very good. It said, not every season reaps the same fruit. So I think part of the journey is like taking the win for what it is. Like, what is the fruit of this season, right? Maybe you haven't been able to harvest, but just taking the credit for what you have been able to accomplish to push you through all of the hard times. But it's exhausting. It's exhausting and it's taxing.
It's a lot of work. And, one of the things that I've always I felt very lucky with when we started Collab is having you and having Jackie be a part of it, because that was, the nonprofit world is completely different. I was reading a lot about other nonprofits and how they got started, and how, especially in the vein of what we're trying to do.
Yes.
And a lot of those, they fall apart after a few years because they don't start off with that foundation. And that was something that, like you mentioned, you have always been honest about from the beginning.
Like,
hold on a minute. Let's do it.
Because you can grow quickly, right? You can go quick. You can grow quickly, and you can find yourself in a lot of hot water, and then add that on top of the work. Like, that could be taxing, or your structure could crumble, right? So you want to make sure that in the beginning your surface is tight, because that can crumble for a number of reasons. People can just start questioning what you're doing. People get involved in nonprofits because they feel good. It's like feel good work. You want to impact change, but there's a lot of legislation that dictates how those dollars work and what you're allowed to and not to do. So while you're doing the work, there's this whole other component that most organizations don't address. And by the time they grow and you get to having donations and large grants, then you run into trouble, because then it's, well, what did you do with the money? How did you keep the money? Where did you source the money from? All of that kind of things that can be used to kind of chop you and halt your progress.
Yeah, I was always, I always leaned on you guys for that, because one, that's not my strongest suit. But two, I know that the work that we're doing, eventually somebody's really going to try to pull those cards for us, because I feel like, that's the kind of, we're the kind of organization where people are going to be upset. People are upset just by our name. They're upset because,
how dare
because
you?
we have a Black agenda.
How dare you?
Right.
It's like the audacity to be Black and challenge legislation and local, and you want to impact where I live. Like, how dare you?
Right.
You have to be mindful of that. And I've been parts of organizations that grew too quickly. So we had a lot of cash, and we didn't have the right, in the accounting world it's called controls, but we didn't have the right processes in place. And when the feds start asking questions and the states start requiring, then they start fining you. That cash can get drained very quickly, and then you end up in legal trouble, and then your organization is gonna fall. And that's not, in my opinion, it's not that it's not intentional, right? People can use that intentionally to make your organization fall.
So we got a couple questions here I wanted to ask you before we get too far ahead. Bianca asked, how do you feel about winning the award this week? I think that's a really good question.
That's a great question, Bianca. I'm overwhelmed, to be honest. You know, I get in the corporate world. One of my partners makes fun of me. He says, "Isis, you like always hiding under the table." Like, I'm just one of those people. I don't mind doing the work. I don't need the recognition. I don't even like to speak publicly. So I was really humbled and honored to find out, first of all, people had nominated me and like took the time to write in. And then to win it and keep talking about the award and the spirit in which it is given. It's just very humbling. I'm proud. I'm proud to do the work. I just want to leave a legacy in which Christian's proud of me. You know, I want him to look and see his mom doing all the hard things, so he can know that he can do the hard things. But it's mind blowing to me. I'm like, wait, it's funny. I'm like, wait, there's an actual medal? Like, like, do I have to talk? Like, I haven't wrapped my head around it, but I'm honored.
Well, I'm sure your speech will be great. I can't wait to see what you have to say. And
I hope I don't have to speak.
You're gonna have to speak. And I'm sure that your son is proud of you. You're doing great work.
Thank you.
Bianca, I had another question.
Come on,
How
Bianca.
can a regular person get involved to make change? I'll let you answer that.
Yeah, to me, it's an interesting question. I honestly think you just start. You know, like when we started HCI, similar to when you started COLLAB, you don't know what you don't know. You just have the passion. And to me, the passion is enough, right? So I think if you are willing to put it out there and be vulnerable with what you want to do, people will meet you there, because there's always someone else that wants to do it, but no one that wants to actually start it.
Right.
I think that you can get involved with groups that already exist. We live in the internet age, so it's not hard to find them. But if you happen to not find a group that already exists, you just start your own, you know,
Right.
you just start. And I really feel like your people find you. So.
Yep. I agree with that. I also feel like everybody's regular people. Like,
Correct.
you know, everybody that ever started any organization, anybody that you look up to, anybody that's ever done anything of any importance, they were a regular person.
Yes.
Their deeds may make them seem like they're not regular, but they are a regular person, and anybody out there can do great things. And I also don't feel like no matter what you do, you're always going to feel like a regular person. Like, you know,
Yes.
you have all these awards, and you know, you don't even want to call yourself an activist.
I don't have a choice, but it's like, to me, you know, because there's a lot that comes with that title. It's just like your work titles. And people are, what do you do? And then they judge you based on that.
Right.
And being an activist to me is an important title, but there's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of support, but there's a lot of judgment. And then you're trying to, like, you know, meet people where they are. Like, call me what you want. You know, the work doesn't
well,
change.
The thing is, you've earned the title of activist.
Thank you. Thank you.
You've done the work on multiple levels in multiple organizations for multiple groups of people. So
yeah.
You know, you've earned that title.
Well, the stars aligned for me, honestly. Like, in all honesty, in 2020, when I joined the board of the Franklin Mint Federal Credit Union, I cried. Like, they gave me the option to join, and I didn't even feel prepared. I was like, me? You know? Since then,
right.
I've been on lots of boards and helped start lots of boards. And I think that the stars really align, because for me, the impact comes from what I'm able to do on a daily basis. So like the Mint, for me, that's financial literacy. It's an area in which minorities, we struggle and we suffer. And if you don't have money and capital, you're just not going to be able to make long-standing change. So I feel for me, that's a way to give back as well in a different capacity. And then you come to HTI, which is like education and community outreach and reaching the people. I love to have conversations. I just don't like to be in the hot seat for them. But I feel like events and exposure give people the opportunity to deal with their own bias, you know, to make change in that light. And then COLLAB gives me the opportunity to have long-standing impact. legislation, things that are going to actually result in real change. So the stars kind of aligned for me in the last couple of years to be able to do the work.
Excellent. We have a couple more questions.
Oh.
So from Kate. What's up, Kate?
Hey, what's up, Kate?
So how do you avoid burnout when the work is seemingly nonstop? That's a great question.
I'm burnt out all the time. I'll be very honest. There are times when I am completely burnt out. It's a lot. I'm committed. I'm just committed to the end game, and I know that I haven't gotten there. And I think a lot of it is grace with self. You have to give yourself a lot of grace for the days where you're tired and you can't show up. And I've sacrificed a lot. Like, I've sacrificed my family. You know, my son sees me on meetings every night, you know, but he understands, like, at the end of the day, this is what I feel like I have to do. Right. Emotionally, physically, I'm exhausted, but my thing is, you're only given a small window, right? My window might be done in August. So between now and whenever that window hits or closes, I'm going to do everything in my power to have impact. I have a lot of coffee, and and I've prioritized by no doing of my own. I have a very great village that shows up and supports me and helps me and holds me accountable to self, to take breaks, to walk away, to learn to say no, to not show up to every meeting. I'm learning, but I'm burnt out all the time. I just keep getting up.
The one thing I'd add is to remember to, like you said, your village holds you accountable, but also to remember to prioritize your self-care. You can't pour into something if you're empty. You have to rest and do things that fill you up, do things that bring you joy, do things that are meaningful to you and bring value to you. And then the other thing for me is remembering why I have to do something. Remembering, like, I don't watch a lot of news because it can be overwhelming for me emotionally, or it can be taxing on my mental state. But I do read. I try to stay up on things, and that kind of keeps me, like, there are stories that make me say, like, this is why I have to do what I have to do.
Yes.
And, just remembering why you have to do stuff.
Yeah, it's the why.
Really important.
It's the why. It's just, for me, it's like, and sometimes you have to take a break, and you have to have people around you that understand. Like, it's only temporary, right? You'll come back to it. And I think for a lot of people, when you feel overwhelmed, you feel so guilty for feeling that way, and you feel embarrassed that you can't keep up. But we all have to address in our own time and in our own way so that we can continue to show up.
Right. Bianca has another question. DJ Ree had a question, but it won't let me post it, so I'm going to read that after.
Okay.
How do you balance mom life with work and everything else you do?
Look, these balls are juggled every day in different capacities. I outsource as much as I can. I have found a way to outsource laundry. If it buys me another hour or two a day, I will do it. First and foremost, though, Chris is my priority. So I've had some real conversations with him about what I'm doing. He's old enough to have those conversations, but quite frankly, when he was younger, I was just doing it, you know. I don't know that I'm balancing well. Sometimes I'm just, the scales tip very much one way. I have, you know, committed to that sacrifice because in the long run, I do feel like he'll be better for it. We'll all be better for it. Right. But I live and die by my Google Calendar. That's the if it's not on there, you know, Kyle. If it's
yes, I know.
It is not happening. It is. I schedule everything. I try to show up as my best self as often as I can. When I don't, I'm very honest, and I'm like, look, I'm tired. You know, I've been on 6 meetings for work and 2 after work, and I'm going to a meeting now. Yeah.
No, I think that's an issue for a lot of people who do activist work, even like historically as well. I think that's always been a question. Like, how do you balance that? How much are you willing to sacrifice for the cause? Has always been a question. I mean, you know, that's one of the main things in most movies. I mean, you know, They asked that of Martin. They asked that of Malcolm.
Exactly.
Like,
And they
and I,
sacrificed their lives. I mean,
right,
they died for the cause. I feel like my contribution is so minimal to the
right,
greater cause. There were so many people that came before me that sacrificed for me to be able to do this, to show up in
right.
this way, to show up as a Black woman in this way. Like, I feel like, how dare I for complaining that I'm tired? Like, people were like, showing up with dogs and guns pointed at them, and
Right.
I can sacrifice a little bit of sleep, and that's just
Honestly,
how I feel.
sometimes when we started Collab, I was having those thoughts like, do I really want to step out in that way? Like,
Yeah,
because there's been there is a huge amount of sacrifice. There's a huge amount of his history hasn't been kind to those who have stepped out and said those things that they wanted to do so publicly. But I also felt like I owed it not only to the future generations, but to people who have done that for me to be
yes,
in a position that I am, for me to be here and able to have the freedoms that I experience.
correct.
It's something that's necessary for me at least. I know, and it's a personal decision. At the end
Yes.
of the day, it's a very personal decision. I want to get to this question from DJ Ree. He said, what's the best way to explain to your kids about what's going on with the police shootings and protests? And I think that this is the right person to ask.
Well, I have very honest conversations. So my son is biracial. I've been having conversations with him for as long as I could because, quite frankly, there were people on his dad's side of the family that have called me the N-word. I've been called all kind of things, from a bloodline that he shares. I talk to him very honestly and openly, and I have questions. And from a young age, I just explained to him that there are people that are not going to like him simply from the color of his skin. I think shielding your kids from reality can be very detrimental to their progress. Chris is a warrior, man. He has participated. Like, I remember he was younger and he posted like his jersey inside out and he's worn a hood. Like, he's just very he's advanced in that because he sees it and we talk about it. So I tell him, unfortunately, we talk about cars all the time too in this discussion of race. Look, regardless of what you do, you're always going into every situation as a Black man. Even
Right.
as a boy, you're seen as a Black man. So there are things that are going to always be a disadvantage, to you. You have to be mindful of that situation. And if you end up in this situation, here's what you can do. But I also tell him that it's important to stand for what you believe in. We talk, I take him and I try to expose him as much as I can to the reality and the history of this country. So for me, it makes the conversation easy. But I would just start with telling them, this is what's going on. We're not that far removed from, segregation.
Right.
And okay,
I
great. There
froze.
you
Yeah, that
go.
was me.
There you go. So, and I'm very honest. I told you at the Merchantville, when we were in Merchantville and I spoke to the police, my son has been in the car with me. We were younger and we were pulled over and the cop came to the car and I looked at him, I said, my son is afraid.
Right.
First and foremost, like, let's set the tone. I'm going to give you what you need, but I have a little Black child back here and he's afraid. So I need a moment. Because the mom instinct kicked in. Like, that probably wasn't the smartest thing to say, but and then I tell him, and that police officer ironically actually addressed him and told him it was fine. But like, that's just the state of the world we're in. I don't shield him
Right.
from that.
Yeah. I think it's for me, the best thing is to have honest conversations with the kids,
Yeah,
and to try to wrap them up in as much love as you can,
correct.
and allow them to be proud of their self-identity, allow them
Yes,
to be proud of who they are, fully, and fully know who they are, and go into the world with that knowledge of self. But I don't think it's never too early One of the things I think that even put me on the path of where I'm at now, and I think has informed a lot of my worldview or started that view, was when I was a kid. We were picking up my mom from the airport to go to the Million Man March. This is the year the Million Man March. And my dad had a Million Man March hat on, and he did park illegally. He parked at a no parking zone. And I remember being a kid, and I told him, I was like, "Hey, I could read the sign." I was like, "You said you can't park here." He's like, "I'm not parking. I'm just running in." So in the time he runs in to see like where she was going, because this is before cell phones and you could check everything on the phone. A cop had came and they were trying to tow the car. They're trying to move the car. So he said, "I'm here. I'll move the car. I'll pay the tow fee." And she looked at his hat and decided that she wanted to arrest him to keep him from going to the Black March. And yes, it's an important story to tell. Bianca was with us. She was like, I think maybe 5 or 6. So I'm like 8 years old. So we see him getting arrested. He was not fighting the cops, but he was trying to tell them that, hey, my kids are over there. You know, you can't just leave them at the airport. They don't know. You know, our mom is in the air. She's on the airplane. Like, so we were there by ourselves as 8 and 6-year-olds. Yep. So they put us in the back of the car. They bring us to the station, and they're trying to put us in child care services. They're trying to separate us from our family.
Destruction of the Black family is the oldest trick in the book.
And you know, it was in that while I was there in the police station, I was witnessing the culture of that police station. Like, you know, I don't know if that's the culture of every police station, but I would think that with a little girl there, they would change how they talk. They would change the things they would talk about, and just how much they just didn't care about us. Like, they didn't care that we were there. They didn't care that we were seeing our dad, like, you know, being stripped down to his socks, like removing his shoes and being dehumanized. They didn't care about any of that. Yeah. That changed my view, because as a kid, you know, you think, I want to be a firefighter. I want to be a police officer. These are things that you think. And I realized that none of that was really real.
Right.
Yeah, actually, she wasn't Black. She was Spanish. It was a Spanish cop. See, Bianca, you're too young to remember. Bianca, I'm surprised. Bianca probably, like, she was crying so much, and there was nothing I really could do. But there was a Spanish officer who came, and she asked me what my mom looked like, what her flight was, and I was able to tell her. So she left, and she found my mom, and luckily, you know, we were able to go with her. Yeah. So, you know, if she hadn't taken, and she took that upon herself. Like, she saw what they were trying to do and said, like, I can't allow that to happen. So, you know, I'm so glad that she did that. But I think that really was the start of my relearning about how America works.
Yeah. It's funny what will motivate you, and at what point. Like, that's such a strong point of your memory, and that probably planted the seed that when you got old enough, you were going to do something, whether you realize it or not. Like, I very vividly remember finding my voice. Like, ironically, you were there. So prior to my involvement with HTI, I remember being so hesitant to put up a Black Lives Matter sign. You know, everything about the media says it was like political and politically charged, and I didn't know what the backlash would be, and, you know, and I'm Black. So like, just, you know, got that feeling. That kind of struggle was challenging enough. But honestly, I felt like when we did the rally that you spoke at, and I read Breonna Taylor's obituary, that moment changed my whole trajectory. Because I realized that could be me, and, you know, nobody would even, you know, be held responsible for my death. Like, our value is so low that there is no penalty for our death. And I was like, well, while I'm alive, I have an obligation to speak for people who can't speak for themselves, and to just keep showing up. So
yeah. So, you know, in response to Ree's question, I feel like you have to have the hard conversations, and you also have to remind them that even if, you know, even if there's no justice system that provides the proper response. Breonna Taylor is still valued.
Yeah.
All of the people who have been, taken from us prematurely by the racial injustice in this country, their lives mattered. Everybody, and that's what the whole idea of Black Lives Matter, right?
Right.
Like, your life does matter, and I
Yeah.
think it's important that we teach our kids that, because so much of the imagery that they're going to see, so many of the things that they're going to hear, so much of the way they're going to be treated in, whether it's in school, corporate, college, corporate culture, is going to tell them the opposite. You have to start that foundation at home. You have to remind them that they're loved, they're valued, they're cared for, that their Blackness is not anything to be ashamed of, and it's something to be proud of. And you have to armor them up to go out into a world that's going to definitely, try to chop them down, unfortunately.
And you have to show both sides of history, right? Because the media will show you Dr. King as the most peaceful person, and he was so well loved, but they assassinated him, right? So he was arrested many times. You show both sides of the story, because that's the history, and that's the history of the civil rights movement as it relates to, the law. Instead of showing, the pretty side of every story. So
before we get out of here, because I wanted to keep this at around an hour, and we're almost there. I want to get because what you just said reminded me of this. What is your thoughts on the backlash against critical race theory and the whole anti-CRT movement? Being that you guys talk about this and talk about education in school, what is your thoughts on that?
It's like anything else. When there's a possibility for the introduction of something that challenges the status quo, critical race theory, the idea behind it is that you're going to introduce the truth about history. Introducing the truth makes a lot of people uncomfortable, because that truth requires them to look at their truth. And the reality is that white people in this country owned Black people. Like, that's the truth. History will tell you, like, there was slavery, and then there was Dr. King, and then we got Obama. Ta-da! Progress. Like, they don't want to tell all the stories. Ripped from history is all the accomplishments that Black people have contributed to this country, the stolen stories. So for me, critical race theory, the introduction of it, it's necessary. I mean, we need to tell the truth and the whole truth, right? That's what we're told. But I'm not surprised, because the reality is it challenges the way that people think, and it challenges the conversations we're having. It holds a lot more people accountable. It tells the story that can't be encapsulated in a couple of slavery movies. It's like we watch Roots. That's what happened. Like, we're not that far removed from the truth. I also think that critical race theory requires the introduction of a lot of news stories.
Yes.
So I'm not surprised at the lashback, or at the pushback to it. I think that schools have an issue introducing it, because it's just gonna shake stuff up, right? So yeah, that's my stance.
April had a great point. There is no large systemic change possible if people aren't educated, and that, to me, is the whole reason that there is this huge pushback against that ideology. Because if people were to learn the actual history, the actual truth, they'd be much more inclined to try to rectify it.
But what people, Kyle? What people? The question is what people were to learn, because some people know the history.
Some people know, but the people that know are the minority, and I'm not just talking about minorities.
Yes, correct.
They're a very small minority, because even Black people don't know the whole history of Black people.
Yes,
like correct. We don't know. Like, we feel the effects of it, we live the effects of it, and we know that the system is against us, but we don't know to what extent. Like, we don't know that when we were freed and they were, you had the whole manifest destiny where people were moving west, that white farmers were given land, given like whole tutorials on how to farm, taught how to make their land profitable. Meanwhile, Black people were kept from buying that land. Not only were we not given it, we couldn't even buy it.
Yeah.
Because when people have to talk about reparations, like, a lot of people feel like, well, why is that? If you learn that history, you would be like, oh, well, they definitely should deserve reparations for the amount of work and the amount of the lack of access that even after we were free were
Yeah.
given. So I don't think that we because no education system is doing justice of teaching the actual history of the country.
Well, the history is likely what's gonna dismantle the foundation, right?
Exactly.
And people know that. And that comes along with the hesitation. So I'm not surprised.
I'm not either.
Yeah.
But I'm just so glad that, that you as a human exist. I'm
Thank
glad
you.
that you
Same
are.
to you,
I'm glad
sir.
to know you. I'm glad to have you be a part of COLLAB. I'm proud of all the work that you do, and I'm proud that you are in a position so that you can protect the ideologies and make sure that these lessons are going to be given to the people that you directly influence. You are a beacon of light in terms of just the possibilities of what you can do in a community when you put your mind to it. And we're all very proud of you, and I'm so happy to have you here for our first COLLAB Convo.
Honored. Thank you for the discussion, Kyle. That went so much better than I thought. Ooh,
I told you it's going to be fun. I told you it's going to be fun. And yes, this will be the first of many conversations, Kate. We're going to be doing this more frequently. We couldn't have had a better guest.
Oh,
and
you.
If you haven't, I hope you like the page of COLLAB. And, make sure you visit us at collabsj.org and see what we're up to. And tune in to ISIS getting the award on Thursday. So go check out API's page and make sure that you tune in for that.
Thank you. Thank you. This was wonderful. I hope everybody has a great afternoon. Thanks, Kyle.
All right. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.
All right. Bye-bye.